to learn about various tools and technologies. So what I might do is just get everyone to put their microphones on mute at the beginning here. There's a little bit of feedback going on that may have helped there. So definitely put your microphone on mute. And because we are recording today's webinar, you might want to put your camera, turn your camera off as well. Sometimes turning your camera off will also help with internet connection if you are having a bit of trouble there. But if we just keep those microphones muted, we should be right to go. So my name's Jenny and I'm the ACT Ralph, Regional Agricultural Landcare Facilitator. I sit in the ACT NRM team. My role in this webinar is funded by the Australian Government National Landcare Program, Regional Land Partnership, and it's supported by the ACT Government. So I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land I'm sitting on today, and that's the Ngunnawal people, and extend my acknowledgement to the various traditional custodian land that you guys are all meeting on today. So with the webinar today, I'm not going to take up too much time because it's all about the LOOC-C tool and Peter Fitch from CSIRO. So, and as I said, the tool is about this new development that Peter's been working on, and I'll get him to introduce the tool and himself. But I'm hoping it will help answer some questions that you may have as far as, you know, carbon sequestration and all sorts of bits and pieces. It's a fantastic tool. I've gone through with Peter a few times and I love it, and I really think you guys are going to get a lot out of it as well. So just before I hand over to Peter, just a reminder about your microphones, keeping them muted as you come in. If you've got some questions throughout the webinar, there is a little chat bubble or chat function up on your top toolbar. If you wanted to pop in any questions you have throughout the webinar in there, we'll have time at the end to go through them. So pop your questions in the chat bubble, and Peter will be able to go through those at the end. Now Peter's going to share his screen, and he's going to go through the tool. So pretty much enough from me, I think. Peter, if you want to take over and start your great information.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny Lee, and welcome everybody, and I'm hoping that the session today is very useful for you. We will have chance at the end of the session to answer any questions, but if you do have questions as I'm running through, please throw them in the chat window, and if we don't answer them straight away, we'll get to them at the end of the session. So I've got a few slides to run through, and then we'll give a demonstration of the LOOC-C tool. So just bear with me while I share my screen with you. Okay, so the title of today's session is LOOC-C, a conversation starter, and we deliberately call it a conversation starter because it could be, and we built the tool to really be a way of doing a quick pre-evaluation on whether or not a carbon project would be a valuable thing to undertake for your property or for your business. The other side of this is we know there's a growing interest in carbon offsets in Australia, Australian carbon credit units, and the secondary goal is really where there are potential projects to help identify those and make those projects carbon credit unit developing projects. So let's get started. So I'm going to talk about three things today. The first one is, what's the backstory? Why did we think it was important to build a tool to support carbon farming? Then I'm going to talk about the tool itself at quite a high level, because we'll get to go into the detail in the demonstration, but we'll talk about the workflow and some of the features of the tool. And then lastly, the demonstration, and thank you very much to Peter Gullett, who has kindly agreed for the tool to take a look at his property just outside of Canberra. And we did that a couple of weeks ago, and it highlighted a couple of interesting things, and so we're going to share that with you today. So why did CSIRO think it was a good idea to build a tool for carbon farming? Well, there are a few reasons. The first one is you would have, anyone who's read the newspapers or watched TV over the last month or so would have seen information about COP26 and the big push towards carbon neutrality by 2050. Australia. Could I please ask that all participants mute? I'm getting a little bit of feedback here. Thank you very much. So Australia has identified that quite a significant part of the reduction in emissions is going to be generated through carbon offsets and sequestering carbon in vegetation and soil as a part of agricultural offsetting projects. This is completely consistent with the Australian government position from 2014 through the Carbon Farming Initiative and the Emissions Reduction Fund, where funds were made available for carbon offsetting projects. So at the moment, the national challenge is as identified as between 10 to 20%. And the money that's been allocated for that, for the Emissions Reduction Fund, initially was $2.5 billion. And the subsequent Climate Solutions Fund was in the order of about $2 billion. So a significant amount of government funding to purchase these Australian carbon credit units, which can translate to additional lines of income for landholders. It's not only the reduction of emissions that we think are an important challenge, but there's also an economic opportunity. And the information I'm presenting here is for Queensland. And it's a piece of work that was done by a consulting company looking at how Queensland could benefit from the production of carbon offsets. And it was estimated that there was around about $1.4 to $4.7 billion worth of carbon credits that could be generated using the suite of projects that are currently being used. That's the vegetation projects. But there are a range of projects that are also not being used, for example, soil carbon. And if you take those into account, it increases by potentially up to a factor of 5, and so up to maybe $20 billion of economic benefit to the Queensland economy if they were able to generate those offsets and to sell them to industry. So there's a real economic opportunity here. More recently, there's been some international discussions about trading carbon credits across the globe. And I know, talking to colleagues in the carbon farming sector, there are people who are really quite optimistic about an export industry around carbon credits. I'm a little bit more cautious about that. It very much depends on the way those carbon credits are put together and also the value of those carbon credits. At the last auction for carbon credits in Australia, the price was around $15 per tonne. But more recently, the spot market, so these are carbon credit units that are traded outside of the auction mechanism, the value was in the order of about $38 a tonne. So $38 a tonne, it is a bit of a game changer in terms of economics, and certainly something that makes a lot of projects more interesting and economically viable. For a lot of people, though, undertaking a carbon project is not just, or may not even be about the carbon benefit itself. It could be more about the co-benefits. So say, for example, if you improve soil carbon, we know there's a range of benefits to the soil. both in terms of soil health, but also productivity, for example. And so recognizing that co-benefit is a really important part of the story, and that's why we've included that information into LOOC-C. We felt that surfacing those co-benefits was an important part of evaluating whether or not you as a landholder wanted to move ahead with a carbon project, whether it's a revegetation project or whether it's a soil project. There are a range of co-benefits, and in the LOOC-C tool, we bring those out and provide some estimation on what those co-benefits might be for the different projects that you could undertake. So I've spoken before about soil health. If you undertook a soil carbon project, that has benefits both in terms of profitability, farm resilience. For example, if you undertook a vegetation project, that could have benefits with biodiversity and conservation benefits. And some of the other projects, which are not really applicable here around the ACT region, but in Northern Australia, savanna burning, have a range of social benefits as well, that they provide employment. In 2017, and this is probably the real take home when we started the LOOC-C development, why do we need a digital tool? We looked at the existing body of research and went out and spoke to a number of people on the land and also within the industry. And the message that we heard time and time again was this one of lack of information, the complexity, don't know where to start. And so what we really learned was that if we were going to build a tool, building a tool that tried to provide that information and I guess clarify what the opportunity was would be very valuable. So from a period probably from 2018 to 2019, we developed this digital tool, which we have since called LOOC-C. It's a landscape options and opportunities for carbon abatement calculator. It's just a bit of a play on words. We'll have a bit of a quick LOOC-C, and we thought we better come up with a clever acronym that matched the name. The first version of LOOC-C was released in 2019. We had an update in 2020, and we're working on another update at the moment, hoping to release that early next year. The update in the middle of last year was to update some of the results to the latest version of the full carbon accounting model. And also we've included some specific co-benefit information for Queenslanders. Queenslanders have another fund called the Land Restoration Fund, where they pay landholders and project proponents for the additional co-benefits that are generated as part of running a carbon project. And this year we'll be including some additional support for Victorian farmers who are interested in some farm forestry methods, which are currently not in the LOOC-C tool. So we've talked before about the lack of information and the complexity of starting a carbon project. It really starts with this very simple, or a couple of simple questions, which are, what could I do on my property and what are the benefits? And so we know that landholders are time poor, and so you want to invest your time carefully. And so having an answer to that question is really helpful. And am I eligible for any projects, and what are the economics? We don't touch the economics, but we provide estimates for carbon credits. And you can do a quick calculation to work out what the dollar amount could be. We see this very much as a sales funnel. And so we want to identify those projects that are feasible and give them a bit of a nudge to turn them into projects that could supply carbon, help reduce emissions, and provide another line of business back to landholders. Our approach for developing the tool is one of co-design. We've gone out and we've spoken to a lot of users, both on the land and in the carbon service provider sector, as well as the carbon market more generally, to work out what the issues were and make sure that we developed a tool that really met the needs. It supports these two key use cases. That's one of discovery, which is, what can I do? And one of evaluation. So if that's what I wanted to do, what does it mean to me? We think this tool is suitable for a range of users, as I mentioned earlier. So from individuals to agricultural advisors to carbon service providers, as well as a regional tool for NRM bodies who are interested in the feasibility of projects that could have NRM benefits as well. We have had a test, a build, test, refine, continual improvement cycle. So everything that has ended up in the tool has really been quite rigorously tested with different users. With the LOOC-C workflow, I'll just step you through this quickly so we can get through to a bit of a demo. It starts with the mapping tool, which is about location. And so we've found this a key feature for users to orient themselves and really place themselves within the tool so that they can answer a couple of questions about what they're currently doing on their property. And these are really questions that determine eligibility for particular methods or project types. We then move to surfacing options. So these are what could I do, and provide estimates on carbon benefit. And so the results of looking at these cards are ACCUs per hectare per year, or total ACCUs over the project lifetime, which typically could be 25 years. In addition, we have information. Well, I'm interested in the co-benefits. What are the co-benefits likely to be? These are qualitative co-benefits, and these have been determined by reviewing the research literature and summarising those co-benefits against the different project types. We're very keen, given that this is a conversation starter. At the end of the conversation, you might have learned that a soil carbon project could be of interest to you. The question is, well, what do I do next? And so to encourage that next step in the journey and to give a bit of a nudge, we provide a set of questions at the end, or answers to questions, that include specific steps that you might want to take as the next step in your carbon farming journey. So the tool is available at this URL. If you type lookc.farm into Google or LOOC-C, it'll come up as the first response. But if you just take note of the URL, then you can use the tool at a convenient time to do a quick estimate. I did want to acknowledge the carbon team. And this is a cross CSIRO team from colleagues in agriculture and food who have provided a lot of the expertise around the soil and vegetation methods. Data 61, who are digital people, and Land and Water, who have provided some of the vegetation and other expertise. So with that behind us, let's do a quick tour of the tool. So just bear with me while I swap screens here. Okay. So if you click on the link to LOOC-C, you'll end up on a landing page. that looks like this, and you select either explore your option or farm details will take you through to the tool, and you can locate and answer the questions. Along the top here on this top menu tab, you will see also some information about the LOOC-C tool. These are a range of it's a range of information that gets down to the nitty-gritty of how some of the estimates are calculated and some of the things that you should just be aware of when you read the tool. So as well as the next steps, and we'll come to the next steps towards the end of the demonstration. So let's get started, and let's imagine that we were going to run through the tool. So prior to the webinar today, I just quickly mapped out a polygon using the mapping tool. That is a portion of Peter Gullett's property. And again, just acknowledging and thanking Peter for being happy to share. Just to orient yourself, this is just on the western fringe of Canberra. And you can see some of the southern suburbs there, Bonython, Gordon, and just to the north of kind of Tharwa and Lanyon, if you know the area. For those of you, it's again just to the west of Point Hutt Crossing, which I know, being a keen cyclist, I've ridden up there many, many times, and unbeknownst to me, have looked over onto Peter's property many, many times. So we've selected a portion of that. It's around about 160 odd hectares. The next thing we do, and just reminding you of the workflow, we've located ourselves. We're going to answer a set of questions that now talk about the eligibility of the different emission reduction fund project types. It does give you an opportunity to exclude areas. And the reason we do this is because if you do prepare a project application, it's only for the land that you will run the project over. So things like roads, dams, native forest, or other things need to be subtracted from the project area. And so you can, if you know there's an ineligible area, roughly what the percentage is, you can take that off. But for today, we'll just assume that it's all eligible. It doesn't really matter too much at this point. The numbers in terms of ACCUs per hectare are really what we're interested in. Okay, so the first question is, what was the prior production system? And for a lot of the land around here, it's pasture. And so we'll select pasture for grazing. These next set of questions, again, are eligibility questions. So has there been any pasture renovation on the area in the last 5 years? Well, let's say yes. Because we've renovated. Has synthetic nitrogen fertilizer been applied during the past 5 years? Yes, let's say yes. Lime, I'm not sure whether the soils are sodic here. Let's say no, they might be. And prior use of irrigation, let's say no. And it looks like we're eligible for carbon farming methods that include new irrigation. And so this is a specific soil carbon project. And it just asks the question, if you are eligible, it is likely you will have to get water through new water rights or new access. So do you have access to new water? Let's say, no, we don't. Okay. What happens next from here is we've located ourselves, answered a set of eligibility questions. From those eligibility questions, LOOC-C works out what methods are available. Again, could I please ask everybody to mute? Could you please mute? Thank you. LOOC-C works out from those eligibility questions what methods you're eligible for. It also does a little bit of sense checking in that there's some rainfall layers, some climate layers, and some feasibility layers, particularly for some of the projects that will throw up warnings. And so if you're in an area of low rainfall, for example, and you want to grow trees, you will receive a message that says this may not be such a good idea because either the landscape isn't suitable or the climate's not suitable. So that happens behind the scenes. So let's quickly run that and see what we're eligible for. Okay. So we can see there are, the color coding is purple for vegetation methods. So we've got 3 vegetation methods that have come up. There's reforestation by environmental or mallee plantings, human-induced regeneration, and managed forest from native forest from managed regrowth. So let's just click on one of these messages here and let's just see what it says. It says, this method may not be suitable at this project location due to constraints on attaining forest cover and or land use that is inconsistent with the methodology. And so down here, it gives you it gives you a set of information that talks about some of those eligibility requirements. This message really is saying it's not that you can't use this method there, it's saying it may not be suitable at this location. And so it would be a bit of a flag for you to have a conversation with the carbon service provider or your ag consultant to say, well, LOOC-C says it may not be suitable. What do you know about that? All right, so let's take a look at the reforestation by environmental or mallee plantings. The note here is on the face of the card of the of this method. You can see that the annual per hectare estimate of carbon abatement is around 8.9. That's actually pretty good. Some of the more arid areas, you're getting down to maybe 4, or even in the really dry areas, maybe 2 tons of carbon per hectare per year. So something up around 9 is actually pretty good. In Tassie, some of the really wet areas, they're up around, they can be up around 12 or 14 tons of carbon per hectare per year. So let's click on that and let's see what we see. See what we can see. Again, there's a little bit of information about the requirements of the project. So it involves establishing and maintaining native veg. And for that productive land on Peter's property, probably doesn't want to do that. So this would be for areas where you did want to take out of pasture production and plant trees. So probably not really suitable from a business point of view. And then a set of co-benefits. So if you did that, what might that mean for farm profitability, farm resilience, and some of the other environmental benefits, as well as disbenefits. Okay, so up here we're just saying that there may be land use conflicts and there may be some water use implications of planting trees. So again, they're probably no surprises to anyone. If you did like what you're seeing here in terms of a possible project, you can save the output of this as a PDF just by simply clicking that link at the bottom, and the PDF will be generated and downloaded to your laptop. A couple of the other methods, these are agricultural methods. You can see this one here doesn't have a benefit. The reason for that is the information is very site specific. So let's take a look at this one. This is the measurement of soil carbon method. This is the one that everyone's interested in at the moment, and we've got a little tool that helps demystify the soil carbon method. So what the tool is doing at the moment is going to the National Soils Grid of Australia, and it's retrieving information that's within 100k radius of Peter's property, and looking at the soil carbon in those 100 sample points and creating a bit of a histogram. So here you can see the histogram. So what it's saying on I guess an initial guess, that the soil carbon in the area of Peter's property is around 1.5%. And around Peter's property, this is the variation. So Peter's property sits around here, 1.5, and you can see the higher, some of the higher soil samples around there are up to 2.8. And 3.3 is probably reaching the upper limit there. This tool allows you to use the slider and set nominal soil carbon. So if you either by talking to your agricultural consultant, or there are examples of projects near you that have generated benefits. Let's say we're able to take the soil carbon up to 1.8%. Well, let's say 2%, which is really reasonable. Let's do the confirm and see what that works out to be. So if we did that, it would be in the order of 13,000 tonnes of carbon, or 3.3 per hectare per year. A typical carbon service provider would say that they could double the soil carbon, and there are companies like AgriProve. I don't know if you've come across them at all, that are really claiming to have quite significant increases in soil carbon. So we could take that up to, let's say, 2.5%. What you can see here is on the right, you're getting up to the upper limit of that histogram. Again, it's not saying that you can't do that, but you're getting towards the upper limit, and even towards 3% is probably reasonable. What would that be? So if we did take it up to 3%, that takes it up to 40,000 tonnes, or around 10 tonnes of carbon sequestered per hectare per year, which is pretty decent. Okay. There are obviously some caveats around that. That's a very quick initial estimate, and what we don't say is what the methods are that you could use to actually increase that soil carbon. So whether it's to change the pasture type, to add to the soil, or whatever it is, then we leave that decision up to the user. Let's say, again, we like this method. We can look at the co-benefits as before, and we can save the output as before as well by simply clicking on the PDF. If we reach a point and we think that, okay, I'm really interested in a soil carbon project, what do I do next? This is where we head over. We'll save the PDF, we'd head over to the next steps, and we'd have a bit of a look. So I've used some of the language today, like methods, emission reduction fund methods, and whatnot. So we've got some information on that. So what is the emission reduction fund? How does the emission reduction fund work? What is a method? How do I learn about it? What is it like to run a project? What is project aggregation? Are there any projects near me? Might be something that you're interested in. And when I did this last time with Peter, we discovered there is another project in Canberra. And if you click that link, it will take you through to this emissions reduction fund map. And we discovered that there's actually a project in Belconnen, which is increasing soil carbon by applying a fertilizer. So that's kind of interesting, and it would give you a bit of an insight into whether or not a project is feasible, but more importantly, who can help me take the next step. And so if you click on that, we've got a couple of links here which are really useful. One is your local NRM body, because we know often that the NRM bodies have a lot of useful information and insight that could be helpful for you. But also it could be that the next step, if you didn't have an ag consultant, could be a project developer. And we've got a list of project developers available via the Carbon Market Directory, which is put together by Australia's peak body for carbon markets, the CMI. And we've worked closely with them to make that available as part of the LOOC-C tool. Incidentally, the Carbon Market Institute is bound by a Carbon Industry Code of Conduct, and these days they are those interactions, I guess, are managed a lot better than previously. I don't know if any of you have had experience there. So look, what I might do now is just stop presenting and throw to questions, just to make sure that we have enough time to cover those off.
Brilliant. Thank you, Peter. There is a lot there to digest. It is a very comprehensive tool, and I do suggest that people have a play after the webinar today while it's fresh in your mind. But we've got a couple of questions just in the chat function here, Peter. If you want, I can read those out for you.
Yes, please.
Okay, so the National Soil Carbon Grid measures of soil carbon, is that averaged across the full 0 to 30 centimetres?
Yeah, look, a really good question. It is across the 0 to 30 centimetres, and the reason for that is because in the soil carbon method, it stipulates 0 to 30 centimetres. We know when we're talking to people in industry that it's typical for a soil carbon measurement to be taken over a smaller depth within the soil. So we've heard 0 to 10 is typical, or 0 to 15 is being typical as well. And you can get quite significant differences between those 0 to 10, 0 to 15 and 0 to 30. So the 0 to 30 is used, and so it does mean there's quite a bit of carbon locked up if you're able to achieve that average over the 0 to 30. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And a question here from Peter. What are vegetation sequestration estimations based on, or where can we find methodologies? And then it's by methodologies, he means the LOOC-C methods, not the ERF methods.
Okay, so the LOOC-C methods and the ERF methods are one and the same. And so we built LOOC-C to support the Emissions Reduction Fund, and we've got links. If you go to the next steps, you will find links to the ERF methods. The tool that underpins those vegetation methods is a tool called FullCAM. It's the carbon accounting model that was built specifically to support carbon farming in Australia, and it estimates the amount of tree growth based on those different actions that you take, and translates the tree growth into carbon estimates. So those estimates are completely consistent with what's used at a national level. There are a few differences in terms of if you were going to run a project, you'd estimate the baseline. So typically on a property, there are some trees there already, and so you want to understand those, and you want to subtract those from your total, because at the end you're only going to get paid for the difference and not the total.
Brilliant. Do we have some more questions? If you do have a question, you could just unmute yourself if you like and jump in and ask it, or if you feel more comfortable in the chat function, pop it in there.
Somebody's Dick, you've got your hand up there, mate.
Just
thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Nick.
Can you hear me? Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed that summary. I'm sort of new to this, so it's a good introduction for me. We have a property just around from Peter, really, about 10 kilometres around. For my conclusion from the presentation you give to me, the opportunities for us would be fairly limited. The reason I say that is our soil carbon levels, as recently measured, are sort of nearer 3%. And we already have a fair bit of reforestation that we've already done without support from any schemes. You know, we'd probably have nearly 25% of our property is covered in trees. So the opportunity for us to take advantage of that without taking out productive agricultural land would be very limited for us, is the way I would conclude for us. I mean, is that a reasonable conclusion?
I think that's a very reasonable conclusion, Dick. And look, in some ways, for those people who have managed to up the soil carbon in their property and have planted trees already to the maximum of the capacity, you kind of feel like you're being penalised for doing the right thing, right? And those people who haven't done, haven't done that, they can access this funding. So it's a little bit unfortunate for that. There are moves afoot to look at other ways to reward landholders who are, with the stewardship, the National Stewardship Program, which is currently being investigated by Department of Ag and Water. And I know with the National Farmers Federation, it's a strong focus for them so somebody's trying to get onto the tool but can't. Okay, we'll just have a look in a sec. To recognise that benefit that the landholders are providing, Dick, but you're spot on. I would say for 3%, you're probably pretty much at the maximum, given that histogram for soil carbon. Scale is another one. We often find that for small landholders, that the cost of implementation and the benefit are low, and they only become feasible if you have a large, 1,000+ hectare property. So again, that's a recognised issue, and the Clean Energy Regulator is looking at some other methods and this idea of method stacking. So you do a few different activities, and by combining those, they become economically feasible.
All right, I think we've got another question. So actually, Peter, do you want to just mention to John Lilliman? He was having trouble logging on to the LOOC-C.
Yeah, look, I'm
not having trouble logging on. I just put my farm in like Peter did, and it's just giving me that error for my farm. So I'm just wondering if it's a fundamental problem with where I am, or whether it's something at the back end server or something that's temporarily not able to deal with it.
So John, let's connect after the webinar, and we'll look into that in a little detail.
Okay.
The tool has been very widely tested, and so as far as we are aware, that there aren't any areas that aren't covered. But I'm very happy to touch base with you afterwards.
All right, thank you.
So please, if you could, my email address is peter.fitch@CSIRO. John, if you could just drop me a quick email, and then we can organise to connect up.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Peter. We do have a question from Christine here. What sized properties are A, eligible, and B, worthwhile to use the LOOC-C and also participate?
So for LOOC-C, you can put in any property size. Remember the tonnes of CO2 per hectare per year. That's the key figure to keep in mind, because that determines what the benefit relative to area is. You can imagine that for a lot of the values, they are in the order of, say, 4 to 8 tonnes of carbon per hectare per year. And you can do the maths with, if I get $15 a tonne or $20 a tonne over the property area, what the costs are. So it does tend to be that, and it is a I guess just one of the aspects of carbon farming, that the larger the property, if you have a particular gain, then the more economically viable it's going to be. Certainly for properties, in the hundreds of hectares, if you're getting, 4 tons of carbon per hectare per year, that's 400 for 1 year, and then multiply by 25 over 25 years. It kind of starts, it's interesting, but it doesn't get it across the line.
Fantastic, great questions. Anyone else out there with a question? And of course, Peter has provided his email there. If you think of something later on, by all means, Peter's happy for you to send those emails through to him. And I guess, Peter, if people do have a play and they've got some more questions, in a few weeks or even during the Christmas holidays, you're still sort of happy to receive a bit of feedback from the participants?
Look, absolutely. A couple of hands up. I'll maybe just take Ange. Have you got a question?
Yeah, I did. I was just wondering what the setup costs are to participate in the scheme. So if you identify that this sounds reasonable and worthwhile, obviously depending on how much carbon, how much you're getting per tonne per hectare per year, is going to have to make sure that you're offsetting the actual setup cost or any ongoing cost. So do you have a feel for what that costs? If you go to an aggregator, for example, or?
Yes, so look, I'm probably not the best person to ask about that. We did talk about whether or not we should go into costing of projects as part of the LOOC-C development, and we made a deliberate decision not to. And the reasons for that, there's a couple of key reasons. One is CSIRO is not allowed to provide financial advice, and we thought, and that's why you see ACCUs instead of dollars. And our corporate people advised us, you need to steer away from that, because if you present the information wrong, and then that could be a bit of an issue for you. So I guess that's the first thing. The second, I guess, reason is it just depends, is the answer. It depends on what you do. So say, for example, some of the methods require you to exclude stock to improve soil, and so that might be fencing, but you might have fencing already, and so you don't actually need fencing up. All you need to do is change the way that the property is managed with your rotational grazing, and so the cost could be low. So it depends on what you do, and that's why we say LOOC-C is a pre-evaluation. It kind of gets you thinking about what the carbon benefits are, but we don't touch the cost side, and so you'd need to talk to an ag consultant or somebody who understood those costs a little bit better, that are specific for what you want to do.
Oh, thanks, Peter.
No worries. Dick, another question from you.
Just a clarification, if I could, Peter. I mean, when I
mate.
talked about soil carbon level previously to you, that was obviously in about the 0 to 15 sample, probably at a number of sites. What would I expect in the deeper levels? Less carbon in the deeper levels. So if I wanted to go and do testing from 15 to 30, I would probably expect less carbon. Down there, would I not?
Yeah, look, absolutely, and look, the soil carbon drops off in a very typical kind of exponential fall. The rate of fall depends on the soil type, and so you do get, depending on the soil, less or more of a decrease. But if it's 3 at the top, I mean, it could be anywhere from 2.5 down to 2 as you go down to 2 centimeters. So absolutely, you would need to get that that testing done to 30 to really understand what that average is. Dick, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, Peter. Thanks very much.
Okay, no worries.
Right, we have another question there. I've got a hand. Oh no, that's Dick's hand. I just would like, definitely pop your hand up, pop some questions in the chat, but I also just wanted to see whether, Peter Gullett, you wanted to make any comment at all. And of course, thank you very much for letting us use your property as a scenario. But Pete, if you're there and wanted to say a few words.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. No, I don't have anything specific other than to thank Peter for this excellent presentation, and I'm happy to be part of it and go forward and learn more about it and hopefully become involved in it in a meaningful and ongoing way. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Peter. And I think I remember from a conversation we had before that, you know, the passion was more about those co-benefits as well. And I think that's, you know, very appropriate for a lot of people, particularly in this area. So thanks again, Peter Gullett, and of course, Peter Fitch for demonstrating Pete's property as well.
Could I just say a couple of things? That co-benefit story came through very strongly when we were doing our user research for the tool, and so we went out and spoke to quite a number of landholders, and they told us a similar thing, that we're not, you know, primarily interested in the carbon. We're interested in the sustainability, and you know, a couple come to mind who really wanted to hand the property on to the next generation, and they wanted to hand it on in as good a condition as possible. So that's you know, one of the reasons we focused on those co-benefits. I did want to flag with people here, there are a couple. We've talked a little bit about soil carbon. There's some pieces that we've got in the wings here a little bit that are another piece of the soil carbon story. So at the moment, there's a lot of interest across Australia and internationally in storing carbon in soil. And the ability to do that is very, very site specific. So we heard Dick talk about, you know, the soil carbon in the top 10 centimetres of his property being in the range of 3%, which is really decent. So there's a couple of questions that come to mind. The first one is, well, if it's 3%, how much more could I put in, right? Which is where we got to. And I said, well, probably not a lot. It's probably towards the top of that histogram. There's another question, which is, if I did put more soil carbon, or even the soil carbon that I've got in there at the moment, how likely is it that it will come out? And so if I measure it again next year, and it's been a little bit drier than it has been this year, is it likely to come out? All right. And the third question is, well, it looks like I've got capacity to top up my soil carbon. How likely is it that I'm going to be able to get additional soil carbon in? Right, which is relates to a range of different factors. So what we're wanting to do is make that information available through LOOC-C as 3 additional pieces of information that will help answer those questions. So again, these are national data sets that we've got, but it could be indicative to absolutely answer that question which Dick mentioned a moment ago, which is, I'm 3%. Well, can I top up the tank a little bit more? And if I did top up the tank, how likely is the tank likely to drain out again? So I guess we're hoping to have that available early in the new year as a new release of LOOC-C, which I mentioned, I guess, a little bit about during the talk.
Yeah, that's great. Was my next question for you, Peter, was is that going to come out in the new iteration? So yes, thank you for answering that. Well, we're very close to the end. What we will do is hopefully send a survey out to you fairly quickly, so it's all fresh in your mind. These surveys are pretty quick. They'll come from ACT Landcare. And if you can fill them out, we really appreciate it. It helps us build our webinars, future webinars, and also just to get information on what you guys are wanting to have, you know, information sessions on. And if we're allowed to do face-to-face workshops, you know, next year we hope to have a few more of those. But we found these webinars, 1 hour webinars, have been quite positive and getting a lot of feedback. And people can watch them in their own time. So please fill out that survey, and if you've got any other questions, Peter Fitch will send out an email with Peter's details on there if you didn't jot it down today. But you can always contact ACT Landcare at actlandcare.gov.au, and we can, or just, if you know me, send emails directly to me as well. But I think a massive big thank you to Peter and Peter. It's been a great webinar, lots of information, and like I said, really go and have a play with the tool. It's great. There's a lot of information on there, and you can actually spend quite a few hours on a rainy day arming yourself with information. So please have a play, get back to us. But really, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to see you all online.
And thanks everybody, and please reach out if there are any questions that come to mind afterwards. Really keen to help.
Beautiful. Thank you. You all have a safe day.
Thanks, Jen.
See you, Pete.
Thank you.